We are talking about the miasms. Miasms is a theoretical part of homeopathy where homeopaths very often say, I don't work with miasms, I just give the right remedy. And that's naive, because just giving the right remedy is two-dimensional. You prescribe a remedy of the picture that exists now. But this picture that exists now, it has been in the making. And in case of Sora, which is a kind of leprosy, it's developed from leprosy, is caused by the Bacillus of Hansen. And the Bacillus of Hansen is the oldest pathogenic bacteria in the world, and it's slowing down the dynamic of the economy of the vital force. And its incubation time may last up to 20 to 25 years, in a time frame where in 7 years our total body cellular tissue is renewed. So it's slowing down the making, the remaking, the renewal of our cellular tissue. And this is the action-reaction pattern, which is based on the third natural law of Newton, is slowed down. This is what Hahnemann calls the ground evil, the deepest disturbance. You slow down the life's economy. And if you do that, it makes you predisposed to different kind of infections where you cannot adequately respond anymore. And this is...
Today's guest is Ewald Stöteler from the Netherlands. He is the author of Hahnemann's Homeopathy. Ever since his first day as a homeopath almost 40 years ago, Ewald has worked in exactly the same way as Samuel Hahnemann. He studied Hahnemann's publications thoroughly and translated different editions of the Organon and the Chronic Diseases in Dutch. It became clear that Hahnemann worked from brilliant ideas, experiences, potencies, and accurate experiments, and reported these processes throughout in the subsequent editions of the Organon and the Chronic Diseases. As precisely as Hahnemann, Ewald is able to discover the value and specific timeline in the development that Hahnemann went through during the development of his classic homeopathy, finalized in the 6th edition of the Organon. Hahnemann referred to this latest edition as, which has now, if possible, become perfect. Homeopathy worldwide is based on the 4th edition of the Organon, introduced by Kent, and also because of that alienated from its roots. The 5th and especially the 6th edition have been completely ignored by the rest of the world. Ewald fills the gap between the two extremes, the 4th and the 6th edition of Hahnemann's Organon. That's when it becomes clear that the principle of similarity is so much more than just choosing the right remedy. And this is how Ewald's book, Hahnemann's Homeopathy, is born. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Ewald today, and I really look forward to joining some of his online webinars and his e-learning as well. You can also grab a copy of his book at ewaldstoteler.com. That's EWALDSTOTELER.com. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout Podcast, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now our mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome back to Homeopathy Hangout, where today we get to speak with Ewald Stöteler. Welcome to the show, Ewald.
Thank you for inviting me.
So lovely to have
you. Be here.
Oh, it's lovely to have you on. And for anybody watching on the video, you have to just see the image of the beautiful sculpture of Samuel Hahnemann just looking over Ewald's shoulder. It's I feel like I'm interviewing the two of you at the same time. It's beautiful. Ewald, now we have a tradition here on the podcast, and we start the same for all of our guests. You have to tell us how you were first introduced to homeopathy.
Well, this was in 1977, January. I went to Amsterdam. There was a congress about alternative medicine. And half a year later, I thought, well, I went to that congress and I took some information about different occupations, schools in complementary medicine. So the only one I found back was homeopathy, the study of homeopathy. So I asked more information and I opened the book, and then the sun started shining. So I started then and never left it. So this is 47 years now, I think, 47, 48 years. Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Has been the leading line of my life. So I've been practicing homeopathy. I've been busy and occupied with Hahnemann. He wrote 2 major books. The one is the Organon, well known to every homeopath. And we translated the 6th edition, which was not translated in those years in Dutch yet. So we translated it twice, and then the original translation from Gutze came out, and then we stopped. And I studied the organon for 5 to 7 years so in a row. And I thought, well, this is homeopathy, and now I know what I have to do. And then I came across the book, The Chronic Diseases. And then it turned everything upside down again. So during my homeopathic life, so to speak, I gave a lot of seminars, and I came across the fact that the chronic disease is very rarely read. Almost no homeopath read the chronic diseases. And at the end of the theoretical part of the chronic diseases, Hahnemann says, this is my grand manual. This is how to do it in practice. And he's not talking about the chronic patient. He's talking about the chronic diseases. So I made a shift from treating the patient to treating different disease forms. And this was inherited diseases, constitutional diseases, biographical diseases, acute miasmatic diseases, venereal diseases, iatrogenic diseases, organ deficiencies. So this is made quite a different approach in homeopathy. It's like Compton Burnett and Emil Schlegel, who worked like that but didn't explain it. And so I learned to know how to use intercurrent remedies, nosodes, mineral remedies, plant remedies. Mineral remedies as being constitutional remedies. Our constitution consists of water and minerals. So the mineral remedies, our vital force, uses minerals to build up our constitution. So the constitutional diseases, to cure that with antisorics, is to be done by mineral remedies and cannot be done by plant remedies. As early as page 5 in the chronic diseases, Hahnemann says, if you start treating chronic diseases with plant remedies, the beginning is promising, the continued treatment is disappointing, and the outcome hopeless. So he makes very bold statements there, and I've been integrating in my homeopathic practice and it's very effective. So it's so effective, as a matter of fact, we have a school in the Netherlands, and we have a school in Japan based on this different approach. So we are not looking for the ultimate simillimum, so to speak, which is quite common in homeopathy, but we are looking for the disease tendencies. So if we have a disease problem, then the process that is leading to this symptomatology, to this expression, that's the disease, the dynamic disturbance in the background. And that can be very diverse. It can be inherited, it can be biographical, it can be an epidemic. So this is quite a different approach, and it all leads back to Hahnemann. That's why he's looking over my right shoulder. Everything is based on his works, very old-fashioned and very modern and very effective and very rewarding, both for the homeopath and for the patient and for homeopathy as a healing system.
Amazing. So you have just put in a nice, tidy little package absolutely everything that I want to talk about. So everything that you've just said, we need to unpack step by step by step.
Okay, yeah.
Because the thing that Roger Morrison recently said, that he said that in homeopathy, we are at risk of becoming an echo chamber. And I think as a profession, we do that, where we say, give one remedy, wait and see. And that is how Hahnemann said that we should treat. So when somebody sent me a YouTube video about you saying the opposite, I'm like, I need to talk to this man. So lay the lay of the land for us. And I watched a video of you on Trinity Health Hub where you were describing the iatrogenic and the epidemic diseases and chronic. And one of the things that you said about we use plant remedies for acutes and use the mineral remedies for the constitutional. And on a deep level, it made so much sense to me, but I've just never heard anyone say that. And I will confess that I have got the chronic diseases. I've never read it. It's sitting on my... So I am one of those homeopaths.
I would say.
Yeah. So I have to be honest and confess, I do have them. They're sitting there. And when you said it's called the chronic diseases, not, the chronic person, the chronic patient. So everything that you've just said in that 5-minute intro, I want you to extrapolate every tiny part, because this is all of what I'm interested in, please. And thank you.
Yes. Okay. You're welcome. Okay. Well, we are talking about the miasms. Miasms is a theoretical part of homeopathy where homeopaths very often say, I don't work with miasms. I just give the right remedy. And that's naive. because just giving the right remedy is two-dimensional. You prescribe a remedy of the picture that exists now. But this picture that exists now, has been in the making. And in case of Sora, which is a kind of leprosy, it's developed from leprosy, is caused by the Bacillus of Hansen. And the Bacillus of Hansen is the oldest pathogenic bacteria in the world, and it's slowing down the economy, the dynamic of the economy of the vital force. And its incubation time may last up to 20 to 25 years, in a time frame where in 7 years our total body cellular tissue is renewed. So it's slowing down the remaking, the renewal of our cellular tissue. And this is the action-reaction pattern, which is based on the third natural law of Newton, is slowed down. This is what Hahnemann calls the ground evil, the deepest disturbance. You slow down the life's economy. And if you do that, it makes you predisposed to different kind of infections where you cannot adequately respond anymore. And this is the basic, deepest disturbance from Hahnemann's view. And that's why Sora is the basic miasm. And then in 1493, syphilis came across as an epidemic. So leprosy has been present on the face of the earth for thousands of years. Even in the Middle Ages, in the European Middle Ages, leprosy have been present all over Europe. Many people died of it. And then 1493, based on hygiene and changes in food and nourishment, it slowed down. It became external suppression. And by the end of the Middle Ages, a new, more aggressive epidemic occurred. And that was when Columbus came back from Hispaniola, and the first outbreak of a virulent syphilitic attack on European soils took place. And this epidemic of syphilis lasted until 1900. And in around 1800, and so if you have syphilis, if you have been infected with syphilis, and you get children, these children are born with this syphilitic tendency. And if you are born into a soric family, then you have this soric predisposition, and maybe even later also the syphilitic predisposition. And in 1800, approximately around 1800, Hahnemann lived in a period where gonorrhea was an epidemic, came up as an epidemic, just in the time when Jenner started to vaccinate with pox vaccine, yes. And psychosis has always been some minor epidemic, but then at the beginning of the last century, tuberculosis started as an epidemic, where Hahnemann talked about Sora, slowing down, syphilis, destructiveness, psychosis, excessive, deterioration of the vital force. So in Sora, it is slowing down. In syphilis, the reaction of the vital force based on a stimulus is destruction. So syphilis is a miasm of destruction. Syphilis lies at the basis of every autoimmune disease, where the vital force, where the immune system destroys its own body, its own constitution, whereas in case of gonorrhea, there's a kind of excess or excessive growth, polyps, warts, fistula, abscesses, etc. And in tuberculosis, we see two powers. We see first the inflammatory condition, psychosis, and secondly, the destruction of tissue. So this is a combination miasm. And tuberculosis lies at the soil of many patients who suffer from rheumatoid arthritis. So we see rheumatoid arthritis deformance. Rheumatoid arthritis is inflammation, and it's deforming syphilis, two powers. And then we live in the time of the carcinogenic tendency, and carcinosis, meaning syphilis, the first attack is destruction of cellular tissue, ignoring the surroundings, the normal anatomy and physiology, and its proliferation. It's metastasizing into different organs. So that's the psychotic aspect. So to cure that, if we know that, so just in a small, you can talk one whole day about the miasms, but if you want to cure Sora, you need eventually soranum. So soranum is made of the bacteria that is involved in the production of Sora. So if you give soranum, and soranum is as a dynamic influence it's not a bacteria, it's a homeopathic remedy made dynamic, so on an energetic level. So it's not a renewal of infection because there is no material bacteria in soranum, and it stimulates the vital force to give a curative response. So it's more like artificial disease, soranum, and artificial disease stimulates natural health as a reaction. So the nosode cures the underlying miasmatic cause of disease. So the nosodes we cannot do without. It deepens the reaction, it supports the reaction to constitutional remedies. So this was also new to Hahnemann. In the last page on his chronic diseases, he mentioned soranum. He says, well, it's not very clear how to use it, and that was lay in the hands of Compton Burnett, who introduced many nosodes in homeopathic practice. So it's very interesting to see that Burnett was a pathologist, and he was into the cure of disease. And, well, Hahnemann in the Organon mentioned disease about more than 900 times, and the patient approximately 300 times. So he emphasizes on disease, whereas James Tyler Kent says, well, the patient, and Margaret Taylor, the patient, not the cure. But Hahnemann was into the cure. So this is quite a different approach.
Very different way of looking at it, for sure. And I mean, most of us are still practicing, I guess, Kentian kind of homeopathy rather than, I mean, why do you think this happened? Like, I mean, I know it's because of the 4th and the 6th edition, but maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about that, because I think LM potencies is something that you use a lot more as well, rather than the C potencies, right?
There's a history of LM potencies. So they were discovered by Hahnemann at the end in this Paris period. So 1838, 1842. And it was during this period in Paris. And after Hahnemann deceased in 1842, Melanie sat down on his 6th edition of the Organon. She wanted a lot of money. And it took 79 years before the American homeopaths could buy the rights to publish the 6th edition of the Organon. And then this was released in 1921. And it took 20 years before a first homeopath, Robert Fleury from Switzerland, says, well, quite different potencies. So also the Organon is very, very poorly read. It took 20 years before the first homeopath noticed and gave comment on these new potencies. And the next homeopath was Adolf Vögeli in the 50s of the last century. So again, 10, 15 years. And then Robert Shore came. But these homeopaths all give the Q potencies based on the way we prescribe centesimal potencies also. We give 30, 200C, 500C, and 1000. And I mentioned homeopath give LM1, LM6, LM12, 18, 24, 30, like that. But this is not done only way. If you look at the Organon, paragraph 246 and further, he says, you start with the lowest, so it's multiple, 1 or 2, maybe 3, and then you raise to the next potency. So you go from LM3 to LM4 to 5, and you can give them on a daily basis. So your healing input is much larger, much more vigorous, and get mild, much more effective if you can prescribe a homeopathic remedy under condition that it's liquid and that it's succussed in between, so you never repeat exactly the same potency, but you adjust it by every dose with 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 succussions based on the reactive powers of the patient. This is the history of the patient, and then Kent used the 4th edition of the Organon and made homeopathy big in Europe, in America, and all over the world, and that's wait and see. Just give 1 dose and wait and see. And that's what Hahnemann says in the Organon. He mentioned in paragraph 276, I think, in the footnote, he calls the centesimal potencies a mistake in lack of better knowing. So because I didn't know better, I used centesimal potencies for years. But these are the Q potencies, LM potencies are the optimal potencies. So
we're such an interesting profession. I mean, we're already have so many different, remedies to work with, and we've got our miasms, and we've got different ways of prescribing. But then the fact that there's this, split where you can't help but wonder that if the 6th edition was released while Hahnemann was still alive, maybe we'd be more like cohesive as a profession. But, the part of the really funny thing about our profession is that because the founder of homeopathy, his final words on the topic wasn't released till the 80 years after he died. And I know there's conflicting information, but some people say that Hahnemann actually told Melanie to hold on to it because he believed that people weren't ready for this new way of prescribing, or she was being protective of it. And some people say it was greed, and we'll never really know the truth of it. There's various things out there, but that is a very strange thing about our profession. I don't know if any other profession has that, where 80 years after the founder passed away, all this updated information came out. And so it does make it very interesting.
The crisis broke out as early as 1830. So when Hahnemann, of 1828, when he released the first edition of the chronic diseases and he introduced the miasms into the spectrum of homeopathy, there was a total confusion. Nobody understood the high potencies, it's 30C. They didn't agree with that, the homeopathic community. And the theory on the miasms was also not accepted. So it's difficult for homeopaths to comprehend that.
I think Hahnemann was so far ahead of his time, though. I mean, he was centuries ahead of his time. I think we're still we still haven't fully grasped the brilliance of, his work.
Really, I wrote a book on Hahnemann's homeopathy, and Vatsala Sperling wrote a comment on that, a review, and she was totally confused also about the writings of Hahnemann. The homeopaths, as a rule, do not know that, and that's, in my opinion, when we go to our school, our homeopathic school, and the teacher teaches not Hahnemann, but teaches his own experience or what he has been taught by the former teacher. And so from generation to generation, new methodology and new approaches. And in the meantime, we go farther off from what Hahnemann wrote. And this is what I did, at least. I have been invested 45 years in the writings of Hahnemann.
Have you got a copy of your book handy? Because I didn't get a copy over here quick enough to have it ready. Oh, beautiful. And it's like 578 pages or something like that.
It's quite a... Yeah.
Wow.
So it's bold with references to Hahnemann. So parts of the chronic diseases and parts of the organon melted together, not melted together, but mentioned one after another and explained based on my 40-year experience.
Amazing. When you said you had a translator, do you speak German as well as Dutch, or how did?
Yes, yeah.
I can only say ich verstehe dich nicht.
I've been lecturing a lot in Germany. So for the last 15 years or so.
I am always slightly jealous because I think if you can speak German, it just opens you up to so many more homeopathic texts. Although at the same time, I don't want to actually have any more homeopathic books. I can't even read the ones I have, so I don't want to learn another language. But it does give you access to the original versions, which means you don't have to rely on somebody else's translation of it. You can.
I got the original version is here, so this is Hahnemann's original organon.
Wow, amazing.
Like miracle book. So it's any question you had during homeopathic practice, any question is answered by those two books, Chronic Diseases and the Organon. And the rest was with the introduction of nosodes and organ remedies. It was from Rademacher and from Burnett. Burnett was very large, big in that, in applying the organ remedies, and they are in the Burica. So they originally came from Johann Gottfried Rademacher and his students, and they were introduced in homeopathic Materia Medica by Burnett. You can filter them out by, for instance, search to the book by tincture, mother tincture, or the material dose, etc. This is not like classical homeopathy, but it's organ level. So specificity of seed, Burnett called it. Organopathy, it's included in homeopathy. But this is the influence of Burnett. And we use it in like Chelidonium in liver failure, Cadus marianus in liver failure, Berberis or Solidago in kidney failure, Taraxacum in liver and bladder failure, Cartegus in heart failure, etc. And then you use the mother tincture when the organ is not capable of responding in a healthy way. So it's not only dynamical, but it's also very functional and sometimes even material.
I'm a huge fan of organotherapy and Burnett.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your actual book, though. I'm so jealous that I don't have a copy. But can you just tell us, with your book, Hahnemann's Homeopathy, what have you got in there? Like, what can people learn from your book?
All about homeopathy. Every step of homeopathy you can learn. So the introduction of chronic diseases, organ chronic diseases, 10 new masters, Q potencies, disease classification, natural law, genetics, what is disease, what is health, individual. So it's like 23 chapters, all different of everything what I said about homeopathy.
That's great. Yeah. If you can hold it, I usually try when I have an author, I usually try to have like a copy of the book up while they're talking so I can show people, some of the chapters on there. But I mean, I did see some of it on your...
We can send you one.
Yeah, just for our listeners as well. I mean, I did see it on your website as well. You've got a lot of the information on there, so people can have a look there too.
Yeah, from dynamic disease, material disease, dose, posology, intercurrent remedies, and miasms. Hahnemann used, for instance, in approximately 80% of his cases, first a dose of sulfur and then the indicated homeopathic remedy. So you have to think in an anti-miasmatic way to do that. And otherwise you just follow the rules and have no idea what you're doing. And this is what is explained in every page of the book, every step. Just as I explain it to you, this is very clear. And people can comprehend it and can understand it and say, well, you can sense that it's true, and in practice it's true. I will say, if I say something that is not true to the participants in my courses, then I multiply a lie if it's not true. So I'm very secure in that what I tell, what I pretend is true, and then it's very effective. For instance, after this interview, we have a seminar about blue tongue, the homeopathic treatment of blue tongue in sheep. And we have been treating sheep and cattle and cows and alpacas. In the Netherlands, there was an outbreak in the last 2 years. And we treated about, I think, 40,000 animals, and only 53 succumbed, only 53 died because we were too late in practicing it. Normally, every animal in 2 or 3 days is back on its feet and joining the herd again. So it's very, very, very effective if you do it like this.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, though. Do you think like opening a case with sulfur and using LM potencies and intercurrents and things like that is still relevant today? But do you think the way that...
It is more necessary than ever. So if the intercurrent remedy is meant to stimulate the reactive power of the patient. So one of the worst things that homeopaths can happen with the patient and the homeopath, you invest an hour or an hour and a half in homeopathic consultation. You make your analysis, you do a prescription, and nothing happens. Oh my God, I made a mistake. I can start all over again. So you feel like an idiot. I have made a mistake. And very often you only come across lack of reaction. Or you start with a mineral remedy. A mineral remedy is a constitutional antisoric remedy. And there might be a blockage due to an inherited tendency. So you have to first clear up the road for the vital force. So there is a free way that the vital force can respond to a deep acting constitutional remedy. Or the patient is in a very bad circumstance, such in a financial troubles or problems at home. And these acute situations we treat and cure with plant remedies. And if you start with a mineral remedy and it's not similar to the biographical circumstances, your constitutional remedy will not respond or cause a severe aggravation. And then in case of severe aggravations, most homeopaths think, I got the right remedy. But it's not true. It's very often, it's just that the vital force cannot respond adequately to the homeopathic potency. And that's why Hahnemann, as early as in paragraph 2, he says, the ideal is a mild during reaction to a homeopathic remedy. There should be no aggravation. rarely that if you repeat the dose too early, that there is an aggravation, a mild aggravation, and you adjust the dose and the aggravation is gone. So he's not fond of aggravation. Aggravations is a loss of energy. Whereas we are taught at school, if there is an aggravation, then you got the right remedy. You can have a discussion about that. It's mostly not true. So if we do it like we work with from the classification of disease. So mostly I give based on the reactive powers of the patients, one of the intercurrent remedies being sulfur or hypersulfur in a given case, or carbophage, or in a cancer case, for instance, carboanimalis. And then a noso based on the inheritance. For instance, my grandmother has migraine, my mother has migraine, I have migraine. Where does my migraine come from? Well, it's from inheritance. So I need a nosode to neutralize the inheritance tendency. And then give an acute remedy for the acute flare-ups. And an intercurrent remedy to take care of the responsive powers of the patient, that the patient can respond adequately to the nosode, that the nosode can neutralize the inherited tendency, support adequately the prescription of the plant remedy for the acute flare-up. So we follow the dynamics of disease.
You make it sound so easy.
It is. Once you know it, it's very...
And it's very elegant. I mean, the way that you describe it is very elegant, because I think I do a lot of like homeopathic detox therapy, Ton Janssen's human chemistry in my practice. So I use a lot of like vaccines or medications in potency and give it back to the client. And almost inevitably there's aggravations with that. And it just kind of sometimes feels that there's no way around it. But do you ever use vaccines in potency, or do you just really
use vaccines in potency? Yes. But remember, the intercurrent remedies, one of them is charcoal. And charcoal in chemistry is used to detoxify almost anything, almost everything, I mean. So if we use carbophage, we very often don't use MMR, or we don't use DTP, or we don't have to use. And if you look at the repertory, illness after vaccination, there's multiple remedies, and we're also tuberculinum and sulfur and carbophage, which neutralize these effects. So by making use of the intercurrent remedies, you don't have to look so much into different areas of intoxication. One additional problem nowadays is with the MMR vaccine. So Pfizer, as a homeopathic remedy, it's not material, almost not material.
Like the RNA.
Nanoparticles.
Yeah.
Nanoparticles. Then we use Pfizer if the patient has responded in a wrong way to these vaccines, and we have to use them. With all the colleagues that work like this, hundreds of thousands of patients preventing coronavirus infections and also curing coronavirus infections, and also long COVID and post-viral infections. So if you use the intercurrent remedy and you use the right nosode and you use the right acute, as a rule, in 4 to 6 weeks, the long COVID patients are 60% better. So they are very often young people, and they can be supported to a more healthy state in a quick way by using the intercurrent remedies, the right nosode, sometimes if they have been vaccinated, the Pfizer or Moderna or AstraZeneca.
But would you use that in a C potency then, if you would?
Yeah, they are only available in a C potency. So as a rule, 200 C.
And intercurrents, like would you do your intercurrent and your nosode and your constitutional, like all of that in an LM, or would you do some of them in C?
Well, that's a very important topic, the posology. If we use, for instance, the nosode cifilinum, which was very often indicated in the coronavirus infection, and I advised all the colleagues to start with cifilinum 7 and arsenicum 5. So in sulfur 1. So we give sulfur LM1, cifilinum 5, and arsenicum 5. Cifilinum 7 and arsenicum 7. Why so high, one could ask? Well, there was a tremendous fear. There was a tremendous peer pressure. There was a tremendous anxiety, fear of death, watching hands continuously, fear of infection. If you repertorize these symptoms, cifilinum and arsenicum are up front. And it's very fear-creating, anxiety, anxious situations for patients. So This justifies a somewhat higher potency. And I treated many, many patients also who worked in hospitals, worked in the ER, etc. And nobody died in all those years. Nobody died because of COVID. And if they got COVID, they were restored to health in 3 days. 72 hours is so a major time frame in which the patients have come out of this acute crisis. It's always 3 ways. We have natural law. We treat patients based on natural law. Everybody has a father and a mother. So everybody has an inheritance. It's a duty to have a father and a mother. So it's an obligation. Every person has a father and a mother. Every person, every human being has a body. And every human being has a biography. So 3 ways we can prescribe on inheritance, we can prescribe on the constitution, and we can prescribe on the biography. We can prescribe a plant remedy, we can prescribe a mineral remedy, and we can prescribe a nosode. And these are complementary. Soranum is complementary to sulfur. Aconite is complementary to sulfur. Aconite is acute of sulfur. Sulfur is a constitutional remedy, or an intercurrent, sometimes a constitutional. And where does the sulfur symptomatology come from? From the psoric miasms, so soranum is in the background. So the same goes for tuberculinum, calcarea, phosphorica, rustox. You see, we have a patient with rheumatoid problems. You prescribe rustox, but it's a family tradition. More people in the family, more patients in the family suffer from rheumatoid affections. So rustox cannot cure the rheumatism in the family history. You need tuberculinum for that. But tuberculinum and rustox look very much alike. If you look at the Materia Medica, they look almost identical. And yet, tuberculinum is not a good remedy to prescribe as an acute remedy, and rustox is very poor in neutralizing the inherited tendency, its incapacity. So they are complementary. They approach 2 aspects of the rheumatoid disease. So this is complementary. I call it contextual Materia Medica. Where does the pathology come from? What runs in the family? What influences the health condition of the patient? And this can be neutralized by the nosode. And there's a trick. The nosode should always be given in the highest potency to deblock the vital reaction of the patient. And another tip before colleagues start with soranum, don't start with soranum in patients who suffer from chronic neurodermatitis. So when there is a chronic eczema, be very careful with soranum. You know that it will create aggravation. Be very careful with sulfur also. Just look away. You have to make very clear homeopathic case history to see what approach is the best to cure these chronic dermatitis situations.
And when you're doing all of, what you're saying makes so much sense as you're saying, oh, yeah, of course, it makes complete sense what you're saying. And yet that's not what we do. Well, I don't anyway. I need to read your book, though. It sounds absolutely incredible. But what I just want to ask is, when you do those 3 remedies at the same time, are you prescribing one the one day, one the next day, one the day after that, or all at the same time? Or how do you... to do that?
So in part of 275, Hahnemann says give just one remedy. But if you read thoroughly, he said to give one remedy for one disease. And if that's what he says, one remedy for this one disease. And if the patient suffers from 3 diseases, you can give 3 remedies, but in alternation. The word alternation very often occurs in organ and chronic diseases, not together, but alternate, meaning that one remedy has a meaning, it has to support the reaction to the other remedy. So if you're at a train station, and in the Netherlands, tuberculinum goes to Amsterdam, and calcarea phosphorica to Groningen, and rustox to Maastricht, there's never a collision, there's never an accident. So they support one another. In sensible potencies, you can have an inimical reaction or an antidote. In Q potencies, these inadequate, these unwilling situations do not occur. So in using Q potencies, they all behave friendly and complementary. So they support one another. Even remedies like lachesis and sepia, if you want, you can go from sepia one day to lachesis the other day without any remedy in between. In sensible potencies, you better do not. because there can be, like with phosphorus or caustic, there can be an inimical reaction. This does not occur in cure potencies, and that's why cure potencies are more safe. And you can repeat them more often. They have a dilution from 1 to 50,000. So there's a lot of more suppressions can be added to the potency. So they act mild because they are only 1 to 50,000 diluted. And they act deep because you can repeat them on a daily basis and success every time over and over again. And then Hahnemann says, it looks like the disease can be cured by the vital force much more effectively if you dose more frequently. So the more doses of the co-cure potency you can add to the vital force, the more easily also very deep chronic diseases can be removed from the vital force. Nobody read this. It's paragraph 248, I think.
Well, you could say it's any paragraph that you want because I wouldn't know that off the top of my head. I'm going and checking.
Yeah, it's all in the book, but it makes a different approach of homeopathy possible. We got diverted from Hahnemann a long time ago, and everybody uses his word, his name, but frankly, very often homeopaths have no idea what they're talking about considering Hahnemann. I don't want to offend anybody, but it's you have to. I've read Hahnemann for almost 50 years, the love of my life, so to speak. So I know what I'm talking about in this respect, at least.
Well, he looks very impressed there behind your shoulder. I actually love his pose that he's got. It's kind of like, he looks very happy with himself. It's an absolutely beautiful sculpture. I can't every now and again, I'm having a little giggle because it just feels like he's sitting here with us. It's so surreal.
Yeah. Just observing.
Yeah. Now, where else are you teaching this? Because I did see that Karen Allen's Trinity Health Hub has got a lecture series that you're doing with them. And I just recently subscribed back to Trinity Health Hub. I used to be a member, but then because I had so many other subscriptions, I was like, oh, not one more. I'll just give it a little bit of a break. But I've just resubscribed back and oh my gosh, there's so much information there. So I was excited to see your lecture series there too. But where else do you teach this?
On a yearly basis, 3 weeks in Sicily. So 1 week a Dutch group, 1 week an English group, and 1 week a German group. And I treat 2 or 3 lectures weekends in Germany on a yearly basis and 2 or 3 in Switzerland. And then webinars, monthly webinars for Japanese speaking people. So once a month on a Wednesday evening, between 7 and 9 in the evening, and once for German participants and once for Dutch participants. We have a congress in London next year. So we are very busy, and we have our own school, and we have the school in Japan, which is in the 3rd year now, just 1 year, and they have the school. This information from Hahnemann is also transferred to Japan. And we are planning to do the same in the USA. And that starts after. And we have a supervision. This will start in August, most likely for American participants. So also English.
Amazing. And where can people get your book? Because we've got about 40% of our listeners are in America and about 20% in the UK and 20% in Australia. And then the rest are kind of scattered all over, Europe and New Zealand and wherever else, South Africa. But whereabouts around the world can people purchase your book?
Our webmaster said, well, people are searching on your name, so you have to have an own website. I said, I don't want my own website. So we had meetings, and after the 3rd meeting, he repeated that 3 times. And I said, well, okay, when you think it's wise to make an own website, then do it. So it's ready already. So I have it already. So my website is ewaldstöteler.com. Without an umlaut, so Ewald Stöteler.
That's brilliant.
And there you can find all the information about webinars and books and everything we do. And we also have our e-learning. So e-learning is a possibility for our school is recognized as a homeopathic school in the Netherlands. So it's officially recognized by the government, not meaning that it's as important as allopathy, but it's recognized, our school has a recognition. And we made e-learning in the Netherlands. It's blended learning. So students here come at location and do e-learning. But for the international participants, we have e-learning in English and in German. So anybody all over the world, if they want to have a thorough education in the teachings of Hahnemann, can subscribe for this e-learning. You find all the information there also. And if you look at it, you will see that the homeopathy based on Hahnemann is quite different from what we have learned at our school. But it's very effective if we do it like that.
And your e-learning, is that for somebody who is completely new to homeopathy, who want to train to become a practitioner, or is it like a post-grad for homeopaths, or both?
It can be from zero to it's a whole homeopathic education.
Okay.
And for somebody who has been practicing homeopathy, it's mind-turning situation, because everything seems different than you learned before, because using pure potencies is mostly not taught at school. Using intercurrent remedies is not taught at school. The difference between plant remedies, animal remedies, mineral remedies, there's no plant constitution. So there's no pulsatilla constitution. There's no apis constitution. There's only a mineral constitution, mineral constitution, phosphorus constitution, calcarea constitution. There's no nosode constitution. So these different remedy groups have different meanings, have the capacity and the necessity to support one another and to make a whole approach possible. Remember, if you can prescribe on the inheritance of the patient, where the pathology comes from, and you can prescribe on the acute flare-ups, and you can support the constitutional level, you have 3 ways of supporting the patient in his healing process. It's quite different from one remedy and wait and see.
Very different.
And watch. And that's why we see a lot of homeopaths who use automolecular and acupuncture and acupressure. If you only use one remedy, remember the 4th edition of the organ. This is not the latest development of the organ. And if you look at the chronic diseases, everything is turned around. Quite difficult for some homeopaths. Yeah,
well, I think you've turned everything around. I think this is going to be mind-blowing for a lot of homeopaths, because a lot of us, we get into our little ruts and our way of practicing, but I feel like you've just dropped a bomb on our podcast and so many homeopaths around the world are going to be listening. And you're right, we need to kind of get ourselves back to our roots and, to the 6th edition and really understand the meaning of that. So,
a small example. It was, I think, 2008, and there were 2 ladies two colleagues from Amsterdam who were at the point of dropping out of practice, were at the point of, homeopathy doesn't work and I'm not satisfied. And I go to Sicily, and after the week of Sicily, I make my decision to whether I continue with homeopathy and my practice and my career. And these ladies have full practices nowadays. Oh. It was a turning point in their career. So this is the way to practice homeopathy. So this is the purpose of my life, to go back to help homeopaths and go back to Hahnemann and treat homeopathy as it was meant to be.
Well, he looks very, very proud of you. Ewald, thank you so much. When I first saw that YouTube video and the things that you were saying, I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to come and talk to our listeners and get the word out there. And I'm excited to hear what people think. And I can't wait to get a copy of your book and have a read for myself. And thank you so much for the gift that you've given homeopathy and your decades of relentless work, and that you're still continuing. I think it's amazing.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. Tot ziens.